The notification appeared on my phone while I was sorting new inventory at my gallery. Thank you for your purchase of 5,000 euros at Le Grand Hotel Paris. I stared at the screen, momentarily confused. I hadn't been to Paris in years, and I certainly hadn't spent 5,000 euros on anything. Then came another notification. Air France thanks you for your purchase. My confusion turned to understanding in an instant. I set down the sculpture I'd been pricing and took a deep breath. My hands didn't shake. My voice remained steady as I greeted Mrs. Donovan, who had just walked in to view our new collection. The only indication that my husband of 15 years had just committed credit card fraud was a slight tightening around my eyes. This piece would look stunning in your foyer, I said to Mrs. Donovan, gesturing to a bronze sculpture. The patina complements the colors you've chosen for your remodel. I waited until she left with her new purchase, carefully wrapped in our signature blue tissue paper, before checking my other notifications. 3 more charges. Louis Vuitton, a Michelin-starred restaurant, and a jewelry store in the Marais district. Thomas was certainly enjoying himself in Paris. My name is Rebecca, and at 41, I just discovered my husband had stolen my credit card details and fled to Europe. But while Thomas was probably sipping champagne in a 5-star hotel, imagining me panicking over the sudden charges, I was calmly locking up my gallery for the day. The signs had been there for months. The secretive phone calls that stopped when I entered the room. The password changes on his laptop. The sudden interest in learning French through an app he thought I didn't know about. The mysterious weekend business trips that never seemed to generate any actual business. 3 months ago, I'd found a receipt for an expensive dinner for 2 at a restaurant downtown on a night he claimed to be working late. That same evening, I'd opened a separate bank account at a different bank and begun transferring my personal funds there. A week later, when Thomas suggested combining all our accounts to simplify things, I'd agreed cheerfully while continuing to move my assets to accounts he couldn't access. The credit card he'd just used for his Parisian shopping spree had a relatively low limit. I'd kept it active specifically because it was the one he knew about. The others were safely tucked away, along with detailed records of every suspicious transaction he'd made over the past year. My phone buzzed again with a text from Thomas himself. I'm sorry to do this over text, but I need to live my authentic life. I've met someone who understands me. Don't try to find me. I've taken enough money to start over. It's better this way. I nearly laughed out loud. Taken enough money? He thought the few thousand euros he'd fraudulently charged to my credit card was enough money? Typical Thomas, always underestimating me. Sabine. That had to be her name. The French cooking instructor he'd met 6 months ago at that culinary weekend workshop I'd encouraged him to attend, thinking it would help lift him from his midlife malaise. I'd seen her name pop up on his phone too many times, seen how he suddenly angled the screen away when I walked by. Young enough to be flattered by the attention of an American man 20 years her senior, naive enough to think she was special. I didn't respond to his text. Instead, I called my lawyer, the one I'd consulted 2 months ago when I'd found hotel charges on our credit card statement that didn't match any business trips on his calendar. It's time, I said simply. He made his move. The papers are ready, she replied. I'll file them first thing tomorrow. Do you want me to have him served in Paris? No rush, I said. Let him think he's won first. Another text from Thomas. I know this is a shock, but you'll be fine. You have your little gallery to keep you busy. We both know you've been emotionally unavailable for years. My little gallery. The successful art business I'd built from scratch after leaving my corporate job 10 years ago. The one that generated more income than his middle management position at a marketing firm. The one whose finances I'd always kept meticulously separate from our joint accounts, despite his repeated suggestions to streamline our business operations. I smiled as I drove home to our house. My house, since I'd bought it with money from my corporate exit package and kept it in my name alone, despite Thomas's repeated suggestions to add him to the deed. Another lucky instinct that had paid off. While organizing the paperwork my lawyer would need, I found our wedding album. Thomas looked so different then, before his midlife crisis had turned him into someone I barely recognized. These days, he wore clothes too young for his graying hair, tried too hard to seem cosmopolitan, and used French phrases that sounded ridiculous coming from a man who had barely passed high school Spanish. My phone kept buzzing with texts from him, each one more condescending than the last. I've been planning this for months. Sabine understands me in ways you never could. You'll be fine. Maybe you'll finally have time for therapy now. Already told my parents. They agree we grew apart. It's nobody's fault, really. I screenshot each message, adding them to my evidence folder. Let him dig his hole deeper. My lawyer would love his casual admission of premeditation. The last text caught my attention. BTW used your Amex for flights and hotel. Consider it my parting settlement, LOL. Perfect. I called the credit card company. Ms. Wilson speaking. I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel a card immediately. Of course, ma'am. Can you identify the charges? Business class tickets to Paris. Charges at Le Grand Hotel Paris, Louis Vuitton, several restaurants, and a jewelry store. All made today. Do you have documentation of the fraud? Text messages from my husband admitting he used my card without permission after leaving me for another woman. I'll be happy to forward them. The representative's professional tone couldn't quite hide her satisfaction as she canceled the charges and began the fraud investigation process. Thomas and Sabine would wake up tomorrow to find their hotel reservation invalidated, their shopping sprees flagged as fraud, and their little romantic getaway crumbling around them. My phone buzzed again. Don't worry about the gallery space. I'm sure the landlord will let you stay until you find something smaller. I actually laughed out loud at that one. Did he really think he had any claim to my business property? Had his ego grown so large that he'd forgotten I owned the building outright? I'd purchased it 3 years ago when the previous owner decided to retire. Another investment Thomas had called unnecessarily complicated, but which had nearly doubled in value since. Another buzz. We can discuss dividing the art collection when I'm back. I know some pieces mean a lot to you. We can work out a fair arrangement. My art collection. The carefully curated works I'd acquired through my gallery contacts, each one meticulously documented as business assets or personal purchases using my separate funds. The collection I'd insured in my name only against Thomas's protests about excessive paperwork. I poured a glass of wine. The good stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion. This qualified. Tomorrow, Thomas would learn some hard truths about property law and separate assets. But tonight, I'd enjoy the quiet and plan my next chapter. Morning brought a flurry of increasingly panicked texts from Thomas. What the hell did you do to the credit card? The hotel says our reservation is canceled. The restaurant just embarrassed us in front of everyone. Fix this now. Sabine is crying. Is that what you wanted? To punish an innocent woman? I silenced my phone and headed to my gallery. Saturday was always our busiest day, and I had a new collection from an emerging sculptor to showcase. Life goes on, even when your husband runs off to Paris with a cooking instructor young enough to be his daughter. Around noon, his mother called. Rebecca, dear, Thomas told us everything about how cold you've been, how you pushed him away. He says you're being vindictive now, canceling his cards and causing problems. I put her on speaker while I arranged a display of glass artwork. Did he mention stealing my credit card information and charging thousands of euros for his romantic Paris getaway with his girlfriend? Or emptying our joint checking account before he left? Silence. Then, well, he said you left him no choice, that you've been distant and career-focused. Eleanor, I have his texts. Would you like me to read them to you? The one where he brags about taking my money, or perhaps the one where he mocks my little gallery? Another pause. He did seem a bit harsh. I told him that texting was inappropriate. I appreciate the call, Eleanor. I've always respected you. But I think it's best if we end this conversation now. My lawyer has advised minimal contact with Thomas and his family during the proceedings. Proceedings? Already? Her voice had lost its accusatory edge. Goodbye, Eleanor. By late afternoon, Thomas's sister Jenna was spreading family gossip through mutual friends. Apparently, Thomas and Sabine were stranded at a budget hotel near the Gare du Nord, their luxury Paris dreams temporarily derailed. He'd tried using his personal credit cards, but those had been maxed out for months. Another red flag I'd noticed. My lawyer called with an update. The emergency hearing is scheduled for Monday. Given his admission of credit card fraud and the documented text messages, we're in a strong position to freeze all remaining assets. Has he been served yet? Not yet, but he'll get the papers at his current Paris address. Speaking of which, his girlfriend's Instagram is providing excellent evidence. She's been posting about their romantic escape all day, including some choice comments about your age and appearance. I smiled, thinking of my own documentation. A year's worth of suspicious charges, hotel receipts, text messages that proved premeditation. Thomas had been so focused on his grand escape that he'd never considered I might be watching, waiting, preparing. My phone buzzed with another text. You think you're so smart, but I made copies of all the gallery's financial records. Half that business is mine. I forwarded the text to my lawyer, adding it to the growing file of Thomas's mistakes. Let him learn the hard way about separate business assets and proper documentation. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being prepared. The emergency hearing on Monday was everything I could have hoped for. Thomas had rushed back from Paris, leaving Sabine behind when he realized the severity of the situation. He showed up in his new European wardrobe, designer clothes that looked out of place in our small-town courthouse, an expensive watch that was probably charged to my now-canceled credit card. My lawyer presented our evidence methodically. Thomas's gleeful texts about using my credit card, his documented history of hidden expenses, the Instagram posts from Paris showcasing their spending spree. Your Honor, Thomas's hastily hired lawyer attempted. My client admits to some impulsive decisions, but Mrs. Wilson's actions have been vindictive and calculating. Calculating? My lawyer countered. You mean prudent. My client protected her separate assets and maintained detailed records of her husband's suspicious behavior. That's not vindictive. That's smart business. The judge reviewed my documentation. The property deed to the house in my name only, the gallery's incorporation papers showing sole ownership, the careful separation of business and personal finances that Thomas had always complained about. Mr. Wilson, the judge addressed Thomas directly. You admitted via text message to deliberately using your wife's credit card without permission to fund a trip with your girlfriend. Do you deny this? Thomas shifted uncomfortably. I was just trying to make a clean break. By committing credit card fraud? The judge raised an eyebrow. And now you're claiming rights to property that documentation shows is clearly separate from marital assets? The business grew during our marriage. Thomas's lawyer tried again. My client is entitled. The business was established with separate funds before the marriage, my lawyer interrupted, and Mrs. Wilson maintained strict separation of business and personal finances throughout. We have documentation of every penny invested and earned. I watched Thomas's face as reality started sinking in. He thought this would be easy. Use my credit card, run off with his French girlfriend, maybe claim half my business in the divorce. He'd never bothered to understand my insistence on keeping things separate, had mocked my careful bookkeeping as obsessive. The court finds sufficient evidence of financial misconduct, the judge announced. All shared assets are frozen pending final dissolution. Mr. Wilson is ordered to reimburse any funds removed from joint accounts or fraudulently charged to Mrs. Wilson's credit cards within 24 hours. But that money's gone, Thomas protested. We spend it on. Then I suggest you find a way to replace it. The judge cut him off. And Mr. Wilson, the court takes a very dim view of using someone else's credit cards to fund adventures with paramours. Outside the courthouse, I overheard Sabine on a video call, tearfully explaining to someone in rapid French that their romantic getaway had turned into a nightmare. Thomas's response was lost in the sound of my heels clicking confidently across the marble floor, heading back to the business he'd never understood or respected. The next few weeks brought a string of increasingly desperate moves from Thomas. He tried claiming the gallery had been his idea. He remembered investing money in its early days. He even suggested he'd been my business partner all along, claims quickly disproven by my meticulous records. He's getting desperate, my lawyer observed. His girlfriend's social media shows she's gone back to Paris without him. Apparently, dealing with an American divorce proceeding wasn't the romantic adventure she signed up for. Thomas's family started reaching out, their tone markedly different from their initial accusations. "We had no idea," his sister Jenna admitted. "He told us you'd been cold, controlling, that he needed to escape. But then we saw his texts, the way he bragged about taking your money. That's not the brother I thought I knew." His mother called again, this time in tears. "The things he said about your age, about replacing you with someone younger, I raised him better than that. I thought I did anyway." I let their calls go to voicemail. Their support might have meant something weeks ago, but now it felt like rats deserting a sinking ship. The gallery thrived, ironically boosted by local gossip about my situation. Women started coming in specifically to show support, often leaving with far more than they'd planned to buy. My ex tried something similar. One customer confided while purchasing an expensive painting. Thought he'd take everything in the divorce. Men like that never expect us to be smarter than them. My phone still buzzed occasionally with texts from Thomas, his tone swinging between anger and manipulation. "You've ruined everything. I never meant to hurt you. You'll regret being so vindictive. Can't we work something out? That gallery would be nothing without my support." I forwarded each message to my lawyer without responding. Let him dig his hole deeper. Through the grapevine, I heard Sabine had completely cut ties with Thomas, blocking him on all social media after he'd repeatedly tried to convince her to send him money for a ticket back to Paris. Apparently, the age gap that had seemed exciting during secret hotel meetings felt different in the harsh light of reality. She posted about toxic relationships and learning from mistakes yesterday, my gallery assistant mentioned during our morning coffee, and removed all their Paris photos. I almost felt sorry for Thomas. Almost. But then I remembered his LOL after telling me he'd used my credit card, the casual cruelty of his comments about my age, the way he'd assumed I'd be helpless without him. Instead of pity, I felt something else. Pride. Pride in my foresight, in my quiet strength, in my ability to protect myself while he underestimated me. The final divorce hearing painted a very different picture from Thomas's imagined triumph. Gone was his cocky attitude, replaced by barely concealed panic. Sabine was noticeably absent. She'd moved on to a French chef her own age, according to social media. Thomas had shown up in his old clothes, the European designer wardrobe apparently returned to help repay the credit card debt he'd accrued. His lawyer looked tired, probably from trying to find loopholes in my documented separation of assets. "Your Honor," Thomas's lawyer attempted one last time. "Despite the separate property documentation, my client contributed to the growth of his wife's business through moral support." "Moral support?" my lawyer interrupted. "Like these text messages belittling Mrs. Wilson's gallery as a little shop? Or these social media posts calling it her hobby?" The judge had clearly seen enough. The final settlement reflected my careful planning. I kept my house, my gallery, and my separate assets. Thomas got his personal possessions and his car, which was worth less than he owed on it. "You've destroyed me," he hissed as we left the courthouse. "I'll have to move back in with my parents." "No, Thomas. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure you couldn't destroy me too." His mother was waiting outside, ready to drive him to her house, his new home at 56. The irony of his situation wasn't lost on anyone. The man who'd mocked my age was now living in his childhood bedroom, while I continued running my successful business. "You planned this all along?" he accused. "You knew this would happen." "No, I just paid attention. And unlike you, I understood the value of keeping good records." His mother stepped between us. "That's enough, Thomas. You've embarrassed yourself enough already." As they walked away, I heard her start in on him. "Honestly? What were you thinking? Credit card fraud? Those horrible texts." I watched them disappear into the parking lot, feeling nothing but relief. Thomas had thought he was writing the ending to our story with that cruel text. Instead, he'd merely set my carefully laid plans in motion. My phone buzzed. Not with texts from Thomas this time, but with notifications of new inquiries from my gallery's website. Life was moving forward, just not in the direction he'd imagined. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my gallery had expanded to a second location. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Thomas struggled to rebuild his life, the little gallery he'd dismissed was thriving. I'd hired 2 new assistants and launched an online store that was gaining traction internationally. News of Thomas's situation trickled back through mutual acquaintances. He'd tried dating apps, but found women his age weren't interested in a middle-aged man living with his parents. Younger women, having heard about his history through social circles, steered clear. Sabine had apparently warned her friends about him, sharing screenshots of his desperate attempts to win her back after she'd left. His career suffered too. Word of his Paris escapade had reached his professional circles, and his reputation took a hit. The promotion he'd been expecting went to someone else. Someone who hadn't committed credit card fraud to finance a European affair. He tried to claim age discrimination, his sister Jenna told me during an unexpected visit to the gallery. Said they were punishing him for dating someone younger? HR just added that complaint to his file. I was surprised to see his sister in my store, but her presence spoke volumes about how thoroughly Thomas had alienated his own family. "I know we didn't support you at first," she admitted, examining a small bronze sculpture. He played the victim so well, but watching how he handled everything, how he acted afterward, I'm ashamed we ever believed him. My lawyer kept me updated on Thomas's continued attempts to challenge the divorce settlement. Each petition was denied, his claim of unfair distribution dismissed based on the evidence of his own actions. He actually tried arguing that his text about using your credit card was just a joke, she told me, laughing. The judge asked if LOL made theft less illegal. The gallery's success brought unexpected validation. Local business magazines wanted to feature my story, not as a scorned wife, but as a savvy businesswoman who'd protected her interests. Young entrepreneurs asked for advice about keeping business and personal finances separate. The best protection is preparation, I told one young woman who reminded me a bit of Sabine. And always trust your instincts. Thomas's mother called occasionally, usually after he'd done something particularly self-destructive. He'd tried day trading, hoping for a quick fix to his financial problems. He'd gotten involved with a cryptocurrency scheme that promised fast returns. Each attempt to recover his former lifestyle just dug him deeper into trouble. "I don't know where we went wrong with him," she sighed during one call. His father and I offered to help him get back on his feet if he'd just take responsibility for his actions. But he's still blaming everyone else. You, Sabine, his company, the judge. I listened politely, but maintained my distance. Their family drama wasn't my problem anymore. My life had moved forward, filled with plans for a third gallery location and a possible expansion into art restoration services. The only reminder of Thomas's impact on my life was a framed screenshot hanging in my office. His final text before I blocked his number. "Have fun with your little gallery. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age." Below it sat my latest business award. Proof that sometimes the best revenge is simply succeeding on your own terms. 1 year after the divorce, I hosted a grand opening for my third gallery location. The event attracted local media, and the story they wanted to tell wasn't about my failed marriage. It was about a successful businesswoman expanding her brand. Thomas's betrayal had become a mere footnote in my success story. During the event, Sabine unexpectedly walked in. She looked younger than ever, or maybe I just felt that much stronger. She shifted uncomfortably, clutching her purse like a shield. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I believed everything he told me about how you were cold, controlling, how you didn't support his dreams. Then I watched him try the same manipulation tactics on me when things got tough." I continued arranging a display of ceramics. "Those weren't dreams, Sabine. They were escapes. There's a difference." "I know that now." She paused, then added, He tried to move in with me in Paris when you froze the accounts. Thought my small apartment would be temporary. After 2 weeks of him complaining about the size of my kitchen and suggesting I ask my parents for money for a bigger place, I understood what you meant about the difference between dreams and escapes. I actually laughed at that. Let me guess. He had big plans but no way to fund them? Exactly. Everything was going to work out once his investments paid off, once he got that promotion, once he sold his great American novel that he hasn't actually written. She shook her head. I'm dating a chef now. We have a tiny apartment and long hours, but at least we're building something real. After she left, my assistant manager whispered, Was that the girlfriend? No, I replied. That was just another woman who learned the same lesson I did. Speaking of lessons, I gestured to a young couple examining our sculptures. Let's talk about your idea for expanding our restoration services. The gallery had become more than just a business. It was a symbol of independence, of resilience, of the power of preparation. Young entrepreneurs often sought my advice, and I always emphasized the importance of protecting their assets. Thomas's mother called one last time, not to discuss Thomas, but to thank me. You taught our family an important lesson, she said, about enabling bad behavior, about making excuses for cruelty. Thomas is still living at home, still blaming everyone else for his problems, but we're not defending him anymore. That's your legacy to our family, showing us the difference between supporting someone and enabling them. I thought about that legacy as I reviewed plans for a fourth location. Thomas had intended to diminish me, to trade me in for a younger model and take half of everything I'd built. Instead, he'd inadvertently pushed me to become even stronger, more successful. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. Thomas filed another petition to revisit the settlement. Judge dismissed it immediately and ordered him to pay court costs. Thought you'd enjoy that. I smiled, thinking of him in his childhood bedroom, still trying to rewrite an ending that had been determined the moment he underestimated me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. 2 years after Thomas's credit card theft, I received an invitation to speak at a women's business conference. The topic wasn't divorce or betrayal. It was about building and protecting a successful business. My story had evolved from cautionary tale to inspiration. During the Q&A session, a woman asked about keeping business and personal finances separate. My husband says I'm being paranoid, that marriage means sharing everything. My ex-husband said the same thing, I replied, right up until he tried to claim half my gallery in our divorce. Trust your instincts. Protection isn't paranoia. The gallery chain had grown to 5 locations, each more successful than the last. The little shop Thomas had mocked now employed 30 people and had been featured in several national art magazines. Through mutual friends, I heard Thomas had finally moved out of his parents' house into a small apartment. He'd had to take a lower-paying job after his former company downsized, eliminating his position during restructuring. His dating profile still listed him as young at heart, though his profile photo was clearly outdated. Sabine, ironically, had become a regular at my original gallery location. She'd earned her business degree and started her own culinary consulting company. You inspired me, she told me once, showing how a woman can build something lasting instead of falling for empty promises. I kept Thomas's cruel text message framed in my office, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of how far I'd come. Below it hung a sign that read, "Success is the best revenge." At the 5-year anniversary celebration of my original gallery, I stood addressing my employees and loyal customers. The space had been transformed from a single little shop into the flagship store of a thriving art empire. Thomas's mother attended, though I hadn't sent her an invitation. She waited until the crowd thinned to approach me. I saw Thomas yesterday, she said, smoothing her designer dress, one she'd bought from the boutique attached to my newest gallery. He was talking about his glory days, about the life he could have had. He still doesn't understand that he didn't lose everything in the divorce. He threw it away. I thought about that text message, his casual cruelty, his assumption that I would crumble without him, how he'd expected me to beg. to break, to prove him right about my desperation. Instead, I'd built something stronger than before. Each new gallery location was a testament to what women could achieve when they stopped dimming their light for insecure men. The young art history graduate I'd hired last month came over with a question about the new catalog system I'd implemented. As I explained the process, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a gallery window. I saw what Thomas had failed to see 5 years ago. Not a woman getting older, but one getting wiser, stronger, more successful. His cruel text message had been meant to be an ending. Instead, it had been a beginning. Not just for me, but for every woman who heard my story and realized she deserved better than someone else's midlife crisis.